Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's Michael Severe. I'm Ravi Lulla. We're joined now by Mitch Sherman of The Athletic. Mitch, how are you this morning?
Good morning. I'm well. I'm impressed with Shane. I've heard that intro several times, but I didn't know that it was all just in preparation for getting to speak with Michael here. And that first clip is applicable not just to Damon, but to you.
I haven't seen him since a cold day in Memorial Stadium.
It's been a long time. You know, what I've always liked about you, Mitch, is that you're not afraid, right? You, as we would say where I'm from, you ain't scared. I love how you got into Twitter last night, or X, about the Gretna East game in Buena Vista. You know, because my kid's in the band in Central, I watched a lot of bad football this year and a lot of blowouts from some teams that just can't field teams. But what you said, I thought was perfect, because one team has got to play. I mean, whether it's baseball or any sport, the other team can't compete. I mean, it's tough. It sucks. But it's not about those teams. It's about the structure, right? It's about the way OPS is right now and the imbalance in Class A. It's really sad to watch.
It is. And I was tweeting from 30,000 feet last night. So who knows what my mindset was on the way back from vacation. And now I'm headed to Lincoln to watch an open period of football practice. So jumping right back in. But yeah, it's you know how I am with those Gretna teams. Sure. I mean, it's more about friends and family and that kind of thing with me when I tweet about Gretna than it is about being a journalist. But you know, those lines cross sometime, and I saw some criticism coming from the World Herald story about Gretna East beating Buena Vista 40-1. And it's like, look, I was at the Benson game when this was the first game in Gretna East school history. And I know a lot of the kids on that team, and they were not trying to run it up. They were not taking extra bases after the first inning. Actually, they stopped with like one out in the first inning. And it's just really unfortunate. I mean, it's a massive disparity between the teams, and on the one end, the high end, you have a team that is a first year high school with no seniors on that team. Mm-hmm. So something is just way off. It's not just in baseball. We see it play out because baseball is not a sport where you can set a running clock in the second half, and end up with these ridiculous scores that aren't good for anyone. But to think that their coach or that those players were trying to rub it in or run it up against Benson or Buena Vista is totally off. They don't get enjoyment out of winning games like that. They should be able to enjoy their first season as a high school, and they are. But in those two games, it's not real fun. So that's I just thought, and I have thought, and decided to voice it, that there's nothing wrong with either team. To be frank, it's the system that has somehow allowed this imbalance to occur. And I even think that the classification, it's time to look at the classification and put teams competitively against each other that should be competitively against each other.
Yeah, Mitch, because I mean, I don't know what the alternative. Are they supposed to just stand there and take pitches and like hope they strike out? Like, I don't know what the solution, like outside of a systemic solution, right? If you're in the game, what is Gretna East supposed to do?
Even sitting in the seats at the Benson game a few weeks ago, they scored 20 plus runs in the first inning, and you know, it's all kinds of dropped fly balls and everything that could go wrong is going wrong for Benson. And I mean, I don't know their situation, but you can tell that the majority of those kids have not played baseball, and the Gretna East kids, they've all played since they were 7 or 8 years old, even though it's a first year program, and some of them played for Gretna High last year. And there were people in the stands even suggesting, like, can they just like wander off the base and allow the pitcher to throw over to second or third and just tag the guy, or just start walking to the. And I don't think that's. I would feel uncomfortable about that.
Yeah, is that any better?
The coaches can agree to stop it, right, Mitch? Can't the coaches agree to stop it? That happens occasionally.
I think so. I believe you can. I mean, I was educated by some high school people last night that the NSAA follows the NFHS, the national governing body rules on having a mercy rule. Or,
right.
But yeah, you could certainly just agree to say, okay, this is over.
Enough,
but
yeah.
what? And I guess at a point that's probably the best thing to do. But that's not helping the players on the bottom of that get any better. They need the experience too. So if you just stop it after 20 minutes because it's out of control, hey, I mean, that's also not a good outcome or the solution.
You know, you said it's in other sports too. My concern is in football. I'm worried about guys getting hurt, right?
Yeah.
I'm worried about. I watched Central a couple of years ago. They were really bad, and they went against Elkhorn South, and I was afraid for those kids. And I was the same way watching Benson play this year against multiple teams. I don't want to see guys get hurt. So I don't know if you can do. You know, in Texas they went to the Big 5A, then they went to Big 6. And took the really big high schools and separated from the others. I don't know if there's enough of them here locally, but maybe that's something you could do at one point.
Yeah, you need to find a way to help those schools that are suffering improve, and they're not improving.
Sure,
you remember the Benson opener this year again in football against Lincoln North Star.
Yeah.
When it was 70-something to nothing at halftime, that's not helping anyone improve. And there needs to be a system out there that helps them have a good experience playing high school sports and allow them to improve.
Right.
We're talking with Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch, let's change gears here to Nebraska spring football. I know you're headed down there this morning. What are some of the things you're looking for, or what are some of the things maybe you think we might be able to learn from this spring period?
From the entire spring?
Yes.
Well, we're going to learn a lot, I think, about Matt Rhule's second team. My immediate level of interest, or my immediate interest, my eyes today are going to go to the quarterbacks.
Sure.
Because of the two true freshmen at the top there. I think ideally for Nebraska, Heinrich Harburg is able to play some kind of a role where he's helping the offense in a multifaceted spot, but he's not at the top of the depth chart, obviously, at quarterback. That Dylan Raiola does what everyone expects and wants him to do, but it actually has to happen. He actually has to go out and grasp this offense, which I think he will do. But again, true freshmen are unpredictable, and I think we'll learn something this spring. The coaches will learn it first when they see these players scrimmage here fairly soon, in a week or so. Mm-hmm. And then we're all going to see something. I don't know exactly what, but we'll see something on April 27th. And I think by the end of the spring, we'll have an idea of whether this is going to be the kind of quarterback situation that Nebraska needs it to be in the fall, or if they're going to have to go back into the portal and find something to help in the short term. I know everyone's hoping that that's not the case and that Raiola is ready to go, and he looks physically very good. He's improved his condition since arriving on campus, but it's got to work. It's got to play itself out. Otherwise, around the team, I think it's about finding depth. I think it's about the athletes starting to rise to the top, and that's going to always. It has been, and it will continue to be a priority for Matt Rhule and his coaching staff in building this roster and putting together a two deep, is to find ways to coax the football skills out of the athletes. They recruit athletes like nobody else, and I'm not saying that other schools don't have athletes, but Nebraska prioritizes athleticism and track times, speed, and jumping ability in a place that is not exactly the norm in college football. It's above that. They want to bring in raw talent and turn them into players. And I think we'll learn some things this spring about how far the players that they did that with in their first recruiting class have come, and even the second recruiting class, because there's 23 of them on campus this spring.
I thought, Mitch, there are three things they needed to accomplish. One of them, you brought up quarterbacks, but to figure out if they're okay going into game one with just those three guys, 2 true freshmen and a guy with 8 starts. Do they have to go try to find somebody in the portal? Can they figure that out? And then the other one was, they have a weird grouping of wide receivers, portal guys to true freshmen, to returning freshmen, to guys we don't talk about like Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, And then the other one was the next level for those defensive linemen outside of Nash and Ty, like what they can take to the next level. Out of those 3, which one would you think you look for the most this spring?
Well, I already talked about their quarterbacks, and that's going to be the thing I look at the most. Of the other 2, they're both hugely important. I would say, I would agree with you, Michael, that I'm looking for some kind of organization among the wide receivers. I think the D linemen are going to be okay. If for no other reason than I've talked to Tony White about this, about what his mindset is with Cam Lenhart, with Prince Will, with Riley Van Poppel.
Yep.
These are all players who, as true freshmen, were off to very promising starts to their careers. And, he talked about avoiding a sophomore slump. So I think they've got, and Terrence Knighton's going to take care of that. I think they've got their fingers on the pulse of that. So I'm not necessarily concerned. I think those guys are going to take, if they stay healthy, take it to the next level, and they'll have a very good D-line when you mix those guys with Jamari Butler, with Ty Robinson, with Nash Hetmacher. Yep. It's going to be a strength of the team. Wide receiver, there's still questions. There have been questions about wide receiver at Nebraska. It's just been such the fluidity at that spot has been lacking for so many years. And here we are again with this mishmash of players, like you said. I think Jamal Banks is a huge key, and it was no coincidence that he was the first player to speak to the media last week when Nebraska had its preview press conference of this spring practice, and here come the players to, some of that's got to do with class schedules and who's available, but you don't just put a first-year player up there unless you're expecting him to do big things. And I don't mean just big things as far as the yardage and the touchdowns that he catches. It's about being someone who can bring that room together. And I think they expect that, and I think they found a good guy in Banks to be able to do that. He takes pressure off Malachi Coleman and Jalen Lloyd and Jaden Doss and Demetrius Bell. They have young talent, and they rave about Demetrius Bell as a wide receiver. He's part of the reason that Nebraska was able to take Jeremiah Charles and Bryce Turner and put them over on the defensive side, because they looked at Bell and they said in practice last year and said, all right, we've really got something here. So you mix him with the freshmen who did play, and some of the players in the middle, like Alex Bullock. We'll see what they get from Isaiah Nayer, the Texas transfer. I think they like him a lot too, but he just hasn't risen to the surface yet in the way that Jamal Banks has.
And Ja'Cory Barney.
A lot of people like Ja'Cory Barney.
Electric. Yeah. Get him the ball somehow. Figure out a way.
He's one of those athletes that that I talked about earlier.
Yep.
Mitch, as we're talking about these different position groups, and then I found myself wanting to ask you about running backs, and I will, but I also think it's kind of crazy that none of us have mentioned offensive line yet. It almost seems like the place where we feel the best, which is a weird thought to have considering where we were last year.
On the offensive side,
right.
I mean, I feel better about just about everywhere on defense than I do offensive line. But on the offensive side, because quarterbacks are so young. We just talked about wide receiver, and the challenges that they have there to become one as a group. Tight ends is a good spot. You have experience. But it's also a lot of youth and a lot of athletic promise. And then you have a big piece in Carter Nelson, who is still to come and join this group in the summer. And then running back. There's some injuries this spring. Not necessarily new injuries, but players who are returning from injury and rehab, and they just don't want those guys taking hits. So you won't see much of Gabe Ervin and Ramir Johnson. But there aren't as many questions at offensive line. Micah Mazuka, the transfer from Florida,
and Baylor.
And Baylor. I want to see what they have in him. he didn't necessarily take to it the way that Jamal Banks did, coming in right away. And we heard an update from Matt Rhule on him in February, where you could tell that Rhule was looking for more out of Mazuka than what Nebraska got right off the bat. I think he was also a little bit late arriving to the winter semester in January, or the spring semester in January. So he may have, they need him to take a jump and be somebody who is a solid piece. He's been a starter in the SEC and in the Big 12, so you'd expect that at one of those guard spots that he's going to solidify things. But again, like Raiola, it actually has to happen for this team. But yeah, the pieces that they have with Bryce Benhart and Ben Scott as anchors of that group, it's very comforting. They're finally to a place where they're older, and they're experienced, and they have players who have done it with some success at the Big Ten level. So I'm optimistic about the offensive line. I think they took a big step under Donnie Raiola last year, and can take another one this year. And if it's a similar kind of progression, this can be a team within the Big Ten that it can be an offensive line that is in the upper half, I would say, of the Big Ten.
Mitch, I do want to ask about those running backs. Obviously, Dowdell getting a lot of the headlines as the transfer in, the high-profile guy from Oregon. I know a lot of people are starting to say, hey, maybe Emmett Johnson was a little bit better than we gave him credit for last year. You mentioned Gabe Irvin and Ramir Johnson kind of working their way back from injuries. I guess, what are you going to be looking at Dowdell specifically just because we haven't seen him yet, or what are you looking for from that group? Because I think people are a little desperate for Nebraska to have at least a standout running back at this point again, since it's been a hot minute.
Yeah, it's hard to know who that's going to be. I mean, it's not going to. Ramir Johnson's been in that role. That's not what they're going to ask him to do. Right. Any of the rest of them, and Ramir's going to have a big place on this team. It's just not going to be as the 25 carry a game running back. That's not his strong suit. He's another guy like Harburg, in a much different body, who can just do a lot of things for you offensively if the pieces around him come together to allow that to happen. And that's about depth. But yeah, any of the rest of them, I'm interested to see. We won't see much of Gabe Irvin this spring, but Dowdell, as the Oregon transfer, you want to see what he's got. Didn't play much with the Ducks last year, but was an elite recruit coming out the year before. Interested for sure in seeing what Emmett Johnson has done to improve his game. He was very good. Obviously, he received that playing time because of injuries to others. So if you have a crowded group of running backs, what's he going to do to make himself stand out? I'm interested to see that. I think it's a big spring for him, a big spring in kind of carving out what his role is in the future of this program starting this year. That's going to be determined in large part this spring by how he shows when he's out there, and it's not really like, there aren't many options, and Emmett Johnson is the one that's healthy, so let's throw him out there and see how he does. That's not the case. I think he can still be successful in this spot, but he's obviously got to win those reps and earn that playing time in practice. And then the guy not to sleep on is Quentin Ives. Much like Demetrius Bell last year, working with the scout team as a redshirting player, he's somebody that they're high on, that maybe the observers of Nebraska football don't really know yet because you haven't seen him. You've only heard coaches talk about him, but he's right near the top of the list of the players that I've heard the most buzz about that we didn't get to see play in game action last year.
Hey, Mitch, real quick, a big conversation with bringing in Troy Dannen and, of course, elevating Dr. Gold and all of that is stability in the front office kind of college football and for Nebraska. Do you feel good about that, or are we not going to know about that for a while if everything is back to being stable?
It's a good question. I mean, we won't know on Jeffrey Gold officially. I mean, he's in the background and was in the background very much so on Tuesday at the introduction for Troy Dannen, and I wasn't there.
Right,
but I tuned in. I paid attention. I got a vibe of what's going on, and I'll dig more into that as I get back from vacation here this week and next week. But my sense was that Dr. Gold, the priority candidate to be the university system president, was laying low at that. So after his period as the priority candidate is up, and assuming that he gets approved and gets that job on a permanent basis, then we'll have a better sense of how much he wants to be directly involved in athletics. You saw it with Ted Carter. You saw it with Chris Kaborik as the interim, that they very much want to be a part of that world, and they're eager to be the person who is in charge of everything, and embrace that role as the president to whom the athletic director directly reports. So I'm curious with Jeffrey Gold, coming from the medical side, if that's going to be his way of going about it. That's still the way that the structure is set up.
Yeah.
But what will Gold be like in that role? I do think, because of his history and his background and his work within the university at UNO and at UNMC, that he does provide stability, and that's something that Nebraska very much needs at those levels of administrative leadership. And I think from my first observations, Troy Dannen does that too. So yeah, they may be getting back to a place where there's more stability, and I think that they're in a position, from the president to the regents to the president to the AD, and the AD allowing the football coach and the other coaches to do what they need to do to be successful. It looks like Nebraska's getting back to a position where there is alignment and stability, but we'll see over time.
Well, and even all the way up to the governor's office, apparently, as well. Mitch, we appreciate the time. Enjoy the time of practice today, and we will catch up with you again soon.
Okay, thanks, guys. Good to talk to you.